Alright, guys, on to 9-3 notes. This section is not too bad. It's actually a pretty simple one. So, been working with Angelo there. That's his art project for the day. Daddy. Alright, so where are we? I put some notes and some videos on how to graph quadratics, finding the axis of symmetry, the vertex, plotting some points, creating the parabola. There's some videos online for you guys on my e-board to check that out. Today now we're going to start with solving quadratics. We're actually going to find values for x that make a quadratic true. And in this section, in the 9-3, they give us two key concepts. One, it's more of an understanding, and then we're going to use the other one. All right, and getting started on that is what we're going to do is we're going to be solving quadratics when b is 0. So we're going to have like y equals ax squared plus 9 or something like that, where there's no bx. When that happens, it really becomes simple. We're going to solve it just using algebra. But before that, key concept number one, no matter what type of quadratic you have, is the word roots of a quadratic or zeros of a quadratic. If you graph a quadratic, where you cross the x-axis, okay, think about what y equals. When you cross the x-axis, right, y equals 0, they're called the zeros of the function. Then they're really important with quadratics. The x-intercepts. Remember we did linear equations, we were looking for the y-intercept most of the time. Now the roots or zeros are the x-intercepts. And in this section, if you're reading through the textbook, the first way they tell you to solve a quadratic is to graph it and look where you cross the x-axis or the roots. Like for example, if you had x squared minus 4 equals y, and it says find the roots of that guy, we would graph this, find the vertex or the axis of symmetry, right? It's going to be 0, b is 0, so the axis of symmetry would be going through 0 here. And then plug 0 in, you get -4. We plot that guy, create a table of values, graph it, and you look for the values where you cross the x-axis. So if I plugged in 2 or -2, I end up getting 0 for y, right? 2 squared minus 4, or 2 minus 4 minus 4 is 0. -2 times -2 is +4. 4 minus 4 is 0. Okay, that's kind of just an understanding of what roots are and zeros. When you graph it, where you cross the x-axis. And sometimes you don't have roots. You could have a quadratic that the vertex is here and it opens downward, or the vertex is up here and it opens upward. You might have one root if the vertex is on the x-axis. Okay, so those things can happen. Now what we're going to do in this section is we're actually going to solve quadratics where b equals 0 just using algebra. So here's our key concept number 2. You can solve a quadratic equation when b equals 0 by graphing and finding, which we just did over here, by finding the roots. And don't really want to do that. That's way too much work. The easier way is just by using algebra. We're going to isolate the x squared and then take the square root. It really is that simple. So for example, let's say we're asked to solve 3x squared minus 75 equals 0. So one way to solve this, 3x squared minus 75 equals 0, would be to graph 3x squared minus 75 equals y, and then look for the values where we cross the x-axis. Way, way, way too much work. But it works. It does get us the answers, but we could do it much easier. So to graph it, I'd have to find the axis of symmetry. Right, so basically I just sub y in for 0. I do the opposite of b over 2a. b is 0, so 0 is my axis of symmetry. Plug 0 in, I get -75. I'd plot that ordered pair, 0, -75. Find a bunch of other ordered pairs, graph them, and notice I would cross at 5 and -5. If I plugged in 5 here, I get 25 times 3 is 75, minus 75 is 0. If I plugged in -5, Caddy, -5 times -5 is 25 times 3, minus 75, which again would get me zeros. That's why they're called zeros. So the solutions to this guy would be -5 or 5. An easier way of doing it, a much easier way, is we want, since b is 0, this only works when b is 0. When b is not 0, we're going to go to some other methods. We're going to solve for the x squared. So we want to get x squared by itself and then take the square root. So here's the simple math. 3x squared minus 75 equals 0. We add 75 to both sides. We get 3x squared equals 75. Divide both sides by 3. X squared equals 25. Take the square root of both sides. Don't forget, when we introduce a radical sign into the problem, we got to deal with the positive root and the negative root, so we get plus or minus 5. There are your solutions. Again, they would be the values where we cross the x-axis. Okay, they're called the roots. All right, really that simple. We just basically go ahead and isolate the x squared and take the square root of both sides. And we found our roots. Do you always have roots? No. So what happens if you come across a problem where maybe you don't have a perfect square number or something like that? It's no big deal. Again, I'm looking in the textbook, looking at some examples here. Let's say we had 3x squared plus, let's do minus. 3x squared plus 15 equals 0. We want to solve that. We would just go ahead and subtract 15 from both sides. 3x squared would equal negative 15. Negative 3x squared equals negative 15. Divide by negative 3. X squared would equal positive 5. And we take the square root of both sides. And this is okay. We can have a square root. We do have a square root of this. You can leave your answer either as plus or minus radical 5. Or estimate the square root of 5 using the calculator and put plus or minus whatever square root of 5 is. 2 point, whatever it is. 2.2, 2.1, blah, blah, blah. Okay? They would be the roots. So if I graphed 3x squared plus 15 equals y, I would cross at positive 2 point whatever that is and negative 2 point whatever that is. They would be the roots. We're just looking for that guy right there. All right, what happens if we don't have a solution? So let's say we had an equation like 4x squared plus 36 equals 0. We go ahead and subtract 36 from both sides. 4x squared equals negative 36. Divide both sides by 4. X squared is going to equal, this should be negative 36. X squared equals negative 9. Now think about that. If I go to take the square root of both sides and I try to take the square root of a negative value, there's no solution. So when that happens, you would write no solutions. Can't take the square root of a negative value. Can you take the square root of 0? Yes. So if that all works out, you get something like x squared equals 0, that's fine. Take the square root, x would equal 0. All right, so that does get us an answer. All right, and that's it. That's it for this section. All right, I know they ask you to do, I'm looking for the packet here. Let's see. Dash U. I'm looking for my 9-1 packet. Somewhere. Oh, I just found it. So, or 9-3 packet. So in this packet, let's see. Solve each by graphing. All right, you don't need to do all that. All right, if you want to use the shortcut method, go right ahead. You don't need to graph all of these. Finding the square root, that's what we just did. And then they give you a couple of different type of word problems there to try to figure out, and some higher level stuff. Again, you can look at these, do what you need to do. If they ask you to graph, you don't have to graph. You can solve by using the square root technique. Bless you. All right. Other than that, I think you guys should be set with that. Continue to look back over the previous day. I posted some answers. I posted answers to the standardized test prep and other things in the packet that are there. All right. Tomorrow will probably take it a little bit easier. Maybe I'll throw a quizzes on, or just have you guys go back and review the week and make sure you understand the main concepts. I'll put something up. All right, so we can maybe slow down a little bit and make sure we understand these concepts going forward. Don't hesitate to email me, send me a message on Remind if you're confused on anything that we're doing. All right. Bye. All right. So I'll probably put something on a little later, just with some answers on it. And good luck.